Good evening, friends. In this lockdown period, we have a series of webinars going on. In this series, we have a very important topic today on code of ethics. We have recently made a significant changes from 1st April. Today, we have C. Asim Trivedi, sir, who is from Indore, very well-known chartered accountant. Formal introduction will be given by our another renowned chartered accountant from Vasai branch, C. Vijendra Jain ji, Secretary at Vasai branch. So this is a very important session today for all the CAs, including who is in the service. We have a renowned chartered accountant from Navi Mumbai, C. Abhishek Shah. He will address all of you for 2 minutes. Abhishek ji.
Yeah, thank you, Virak. Welcome, Asim sir. Welcome, Vijendra bhai. So, on behalf of me and Virak, so we are working for this network since last 6 years, and we have connected around 15,000 chartered accountant across India through this social media network like Facebook, WhatsApp groups. We are having around 100 plus WhatsApp group, and recently last year we have opened one Telegram group. Now around 7,500 members are there in Telegram group also. So our basic motto is that to connect people. Networking is the net worth in recent scenario. Also, various kind of opportunities or vacancies or assignment which can be shared mutually by our fellow chartered accountants. So overall, our purpose is to develop young and motivate young chartered accountant. So just to give you a brief introduction of CA Vijendra Jain. CA Vijendra Jain is the secretary of Vasai branch of WIRC, and he's a very active and social person in all kind of these things. He's a activate. He is working for ICI last 10 years, and he has a great knowledge in CA plus CS exposure. So now I request Vijendra bhai to please introduce our speakers and great personalities, C. Asim Trivedi sir.
Thank you, Abhishek Bhai. Thank you, Virag. Welcome you all members. Before giving the brief introduction today about our Asim sir, as you know all aware, Mr. Virag and Abhishek doing the social course for all chartered accountants across the India as well as Mumbai. First, I thanks and salute to both of you young leaders, from one from the Navi Mumbai and one from the BKC side. I salute you both, you guys. You're doing this wonderful job for 15,000 plus chartered accountant. In addition of that, I welcome you, my guru Asim Trivedi sir, a tycoon of auditing from the Indore, proud of Nata Professional Academy. जो भी इंस्टीट्यूट के इंडस बॉडीज के अंदर जो होते हैं सेटअप्स या कभी भी कोई चीज चेंजेस होते हैं तो वहां पे असीम सर का बहुत बड़ा योगदान रहता है। असीम सर को जो भी अगर नाटा प्रोफेशनल एकेडमी को डायरेक्टली इनडायरेक्टली जानता है तो असीम सर वहां पे जुड़े हुए हैं। मुंबई में लास्ट 12 साल से तैयार इंस्टीट्यूट में जो कोड ऑफ एथिक्स के टॉपिक्स होते हुए आए हैं, हम चार्टर्ड अकाउंटेंट्स या हमारे सीनियर्स और हमारे जूनियर्स जो कोड ऑफ एथिक्स फाइनल का पढ़ के आए हैं, वसीम त्रिवेदी सर का ही पढ़ के आए हैं, उनको किसी इंट्रोडक्शन का मोहताज नहीं है। इंस्टीट्यूट ऑफ आईसीआई दिल्ली, आईसीआई इंदौर चैप्टर, इंस्टीट्यूट का ऑडिटिंग फर्टर्निटी का एवरी मेंबर, एवरी प्रोफेसर is a renowned chartered accountant. He is having their own book, on application. We welcome you, sir, in this platform, and thank you for accepting our invitation on the last moment. Now your time, and we looking forward to hear you from the code of ethics, which is a very important, and this is you are a expert in this regard. We all chartered accountant 150 plus members are here to watch you and see you. Now is your time, and I give the chance to you. Thank you, Abhishek.
Thank you, sir.
Abhishek, Virag, and Vijayendra for inviting me before all Mumbaikars. Thank you. See, this code of ethics which came, and I think this code of ethics is being now. Am I audible to everyone?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
So, This code of ethics, which has been drastically changed in last version, this was pending since last 2009. Actually, the last version of code of ethics was available with us in 2009, and now this code of ethics had came all the way 10 years after that. In between these 10 years, lot of changes took place. Companies Act completely replaced, GST Act came, other changes in ISBA code, that is International Ethical Standards Board, changed its all code of ethics. They came out with a new version of 2018. So, and in between Satyam was there, in between IIFL is there, in between Kingfisher is there, in between Nirav Modi is there, in between PNB was there. So series of scams, lot of changes during the in between these 10 years. So code of ethics was due for its change. An institute that came out new code of ethics, with this new code of ethics in 3 parts. वैसे कोड ऑफ एथिक्स जो हमारे पास आता था, whenever we were used to have code of ethics, it was a simple light green colors book, and then that color had been changed in 2009. That is a blue color book. A single blue color book was known as code of ethics. In that case, code of ethics was divided into 2 parts, part A and part B. Part A was ISBA code of ethics, which was not that much talked about from 2009 to 2018. But in this avatar of code of ethics, everyone is talking about part A more than part B. That is first time happening. In 2009, we introduced part A. The history of part A is that we have code of ethics since 1965. We have code of ethics in form of compilation of all do's and compilation of all don'ts, which are expressed in our Chartered Accountants Act 1949 and their regulations. So code of ethics was nothing but a compilation of do's and compilation of don'ts for chartered accountant, whether they are in practice, whether they are in service. So that was compilation of do's and don'ts, which we known as a professional misconduct and professional conducts. So our name of the code of ethics before 2009 was Code of Conduct and Professional Ethics. And then we came out with new publication in 2009 as Code of Ethics. So this Code of Ethics, which came in 2009, had first time introduced part A, and that part A was introduced as ISBA Code of Ethics, that is International Ethical Standard Board for Accountants. They have introduced Code of Ethics, and that Code of Ethics has been adopted by us. Now in 2009, there was a bit problem that how should we treat that Code of Ethics, because we already had our own Code of Ethics that is called Chartered Accountants Act 1949 and its regulation. So a way out has been designed that let us do one thing, that we should divide our code of ethics into 2 parts. Part A, that is an international code of ethics. Part B, that is the domestic code of ethics. And then a question arises that how our members are going to bound by this international code of ethics, because the national code of ethics which we have, that is known as Code of Ethics, and that is known as Chartered Accountants Act and Chartered Accountants Act 1949 and its regulation. So when we have filled the form to become member of the institute, we signed it that we will be abide by every rules and regulations made by the institute. So whatever determined by the institute, whatever decided by the institute, whatever required by the Chartered Accountants Act, whatever required by the regulation, was binding on us always. But how this international code of ethics could become binding on Indian chartered accountant, then there was a question arose in the mind of council member that how we can force our chartered accountants to follow this international code. So if you go to preface of 2009 edition, you will find that Instituted came out with the in the preface, president of ICAI, then president of ICAI, wrote one line in that particular preface that the part A of Code of Ethics shall be treated as guidelines issued by the Institute of Chartered Accountants of India, guidelines issued by the Council of the Institute of Chartered Accountants of India. And once it is declared that it is a guideline issued by the Council of ICAI, every guideline issued by the Council of ICAI shall become binding on member, and non-compliance with any guideline which is mentioned by the which is given by the Council of ICAI, one has to be very clear that it would be a clear-cut case of misconduct under clause number 1 of the part 2 of the second schedule. And in that second schedule, we have major offences which are being decided by the disciplinary committee. You all know that we have two kinds of offence under our Chartered Accountants Act 1949. One is called minor offences, one are known as major offences. Minor offences are contained in the first schedule and major offences are contained in the second schedule. Why we treat minor offences? Because these are being dealt by the Board of Discipline. That's a lower authority. And why we take them as a major misconduct? So because that is being taken care by the disciplinary committee. So that is the point. Why we are treating them as a minor misconduct? Because any clause which is given in the first part, the first schedule, whatever misconduct is defined in first schedule is defined for chartered accountants internally. None of the clause which is given under the first schedule is significantly affecting the users of the financial statement. That's why we treat all the first schedule offences as minor offences. While in the second schedule, whatever category we have categorically kept 10 clauses in part 1, then 4 clauses in part 2nd and 1 clause in part 3rd, those 15 misconducts which we categorized in the second schedule, they are directly affecting the users, they are directly affecting the public. That's why we treat them as a major offense. And now my point to conclude here is what? The point which I want to conclude here is that non-compliance with part A will become a major offense for every one of us. Hence, we cannot discount part A. That is very important. We cannot treat part A as, oh, it's an international law. We have to follow only part B because that is an Indian law. No, sir. Non-compliance of part A is a serious offense that in itself it's a misconduct, and this misconduct which I'm talking about is misconduct under clause number 1 of the part 2nd of the second schedule to section 22 of Chartered Accountants Act 1949. With this I am presenting part A, which is a burning issue countrywide. पूरे देश में कहीं भी निकल जाइए, इसके प्रोविजंस ने आग लगा रखी. Let's start. Why ethics? The only quote reminds me time and again, and that quote is by our Mahatma Gandhi ji. The world has enough for everyone's need, but not enough for everyone's greed. हम कितने ही कोड ऑफ एथिक्स बना लें, हम कितने ही प्रिंसिपल्स बना लें, हम कितने ही लॉज लगा लें, हम कुछ भी कर लें, ethics cannot be defined. Ethics can only be practiced. Ethics cannot be taught. Ethics will come through a pure heart. So that's the point which I want to say. Whatever I am discussing today is law, is standard, is provision, is clause. But practicing those provisions, practicing those clauses, practicing those and bring them into reality is a tough job. So मेरे बोलने और आपके सुनने से एथिक्स नहीं होगा. मेरे बोलने, आपके सुनने, आपके सुनने, आपके समझने और आपके करने से एथिक्स होगा. That is the point. Ethics cannot be taught in words. It can be understood and it can be practiced. These are the two fine lines in which we can sum up the whole ethics. You can listen ethics, you can understand ethics, but they are of no use if you are not practicing the ethics. So let's start with the part A that is contained in volume 1 of the Institute of Chartered Accountants of India's Code of Ethics. This volume 1 has been introduced as Code of Ethics Part A, made applicable to all chartered accountants from 1st of July 2020. We have time, and अब इसको आप सिल्वर लाइन कह लें तो in Corona lockdown we have really a time to read this whole volume 1, what it requires, and it has enormous burning issues, I must tell you. Volume 1 which came out, it contains, first part contains the general compliance with the principles, that integrity, objectivity, independence, this, that, and all threats and all that is called part 1. Part 2 of this contains clauses for chartered accountant who are in service. So I request every chartered accountant who is in service to read religiously that part, and it contains enormous provision. It has revised completely. It has duty on shoulders of chartered accountants who are in service, and the provisions which are relating to nuclear non-compliance with laws and regulation, my dear friends, it's equally on your shoulders also, because you are CEO and CFO of the companies, or you are the persons who are behind the accounts of the company. You can be treated as an officer in default under Companies Act. So my dear friends, part A is not only important for chartered accountants who are in practice, but more important for chartered accountants who are in service, because part 1 for chartered accountant, this volume 1 contains whatever clauses for chartered accountant in practice. They are more or less extension of whatever we are containing in part B. And in India, our Chartered Accountants Act has been predominantly designed for chartered accountants in practice. So more and more clauses in volume 2 are applicable to chartered accountants in practice. And in this volume 1, whatever we are having is more or less extension of whatever in part B. Sir, either you say part A, part B, or you say volume 1, volume 2. Sir. I must clear first to you what vocabulary I am using. See, we have 3 volumes of Code of Ethics. Volume 1 contains ISBA Code of Ethics, which is known as part A. Volume 2 contains Chartered Accountants Act Code of Ethics, which is called Part B. And we have Volume 3, which contains case studies, which are there in Chartered Accountants Act right now. So we have 3 volumes. So if I say Part A, that means I am talking about Volume 1. If I say Part B, that I am talking about Volume 2. And if I say case studies, so I am talking about Part 3. I'm not going to talk about Part 3 right now. I'm talking about Part 1 and Part 2. So this Volume 1 majorly contains provisions equally contains provisions relating to chartered accountants who are in service. So my special alert to all of you that kindly go through these kindly go through what is the purpose, for what. I'm not getting your question, Kishore bhai. For what purpose you are asking me? A question came, what is the purpose? Purpose is what I'll explain you. Let me go to the another point. Burning issue number 1. That is for chartered accountants in practice. What is this 15% fees criteria? Sir, a practicing chartered accountant who is going to become auditor of the company should have independence of mind. His independence will be compromised if he has any kind of self-interest threat. What is self-interest threat? Self-interest threat means some interest in the entity which may affect my independence. And to address this self-interest threat, we already have under our section 141 of the Companies Act that the person should not be employee or officer of the company, should not become the auditor. Then they say partner of the employee, partner of the officer, employee of the employee, employee of the officer should not become auditor of the company. Then they say if you have more than 5 lakh, you should not have a single security in your hand, neither you nor your partner in security in the company, not in the company. Company's holding company, company's subsidiary company, company's associate company, company's joint venture, they should not have. Then they say relative may have interest, but only up to 1 lakh rupees face value. Then they say you should not have indebtedness for more than rupees 5 lakhs, either in the company or all companies. These all were, you should not have business relationship with the entity. Your relative should not be KMP of the entity. Whatever they have given under section 141 subsection 3 is remedies for self-interest threat. Amongst it, one issue was left to be addressed by Companies Act, and that is, hey auditor, you are going to conduct audit of a company. What fees this company is offering to you? He said, sir, I am getting a very handsome amount of rupees 8 lakhs as an audit fees from the company. Our firm is getting 8 lakh rupees from this particular audit client. Very good. What is your total turnover? Sir, our total turnover of the firm is 20 lakhs. Great. Now, if your total turnover of your company is 20 lakhs and you are getting 8 lakhs audit fees from a single client, that fees in itself creates a self-interest threat. Because 8 lakh reaches to 40% of your total receipts. So if you are getting 40% of your receipts from one single client, it was not significant as per Code of Ethics Part A of 2009 Act. That 40% has now been reduced to 15%. And if it is more than 15%, then there is your duty which is casted on you. So that's why that is the burning issue of 15% which I am talking about. So let me give you once again the sensitization that the fees, what international expert and international authority feels. An international authority feels that if one client is giving you 15% or more of the fees, of the total fees you receive, it may create a self-interest threat which may be in a compromising situation of independence. For that, they have introduced this clause. The new provision has been introduced as requirement 410.4. My dear friends, अभी तक accounting standards होते थे, auditing standards होते थे, internal auditing standards होते थे, ICDS होते थे. अब एक और standard आया है, one more standard introduced by this Code of Ethics Part 1, that Volume 1, Part A, and that is called Independence Standard. And this independent standards contain this point that as per the provision of revised code, where for 2 consecutive years, total gross annual professional fees from the audit client and its related entities, not only audit client and its related entities means holding, subsidiary, associate and all, if it represent then more than 15% of the total fee received by the firm shall disclose to those charged with governance.
Sorry, sir. Sorry, sir.
Yeah.
Sir, can you do slideshow mode, because your PPT is not showing properly.
What happened?
Slideshow mode in presentation.
Okay.
Thank you, sir.
Is it okay?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Is it okay?
Yes, sir. It's okay.
Okay. So what I am saying is, just so the new provision says that if 2 consecutive years, whatever fee you are receiving from client is what, sorry, just a minute, just want to minimize it. Yeah. As per this new provision, when 2 consecutive years, the total gross annual professional fees from the audit client and its related entity represents more than 50% of the total fee received by the firm shall disclose to those charged with governance that though it is more than 15%, but we are exercising all independence in the audit and we are addressing the threat, and this is not going to affect our independence. Now the question which arises from here is, there are certain members who are arguing that, sir, if I am going and saying to those charged with governance that, sir, whatever you are giving to me is 20% of the total fees received by me, then, sir, would it not be Like I am disclosing the client that how much I am dependent on you. That's why it is a burning issue. Okay. Second disclosure is what? Second point says no such ceiling on total fees of the firm would be applicable where such fees does not exceed rupees 5 lakhs. Okay. If the fee which is received to you does not exceed rupees 5 lakh, no ceiling on total fees of the firm would be applicable where such fees does not exceed rupees 5 lakh. Further, no such ceiling on total fees of the firm would be applicable in case of audit of government companies, public sector undertaking, nationalized banks, public financial institution, or where the appointments of auditor are made by the government. Okay, but let me check. No such ceiling on total fees of the firm would be applicable where such fees does not exceed 5 lakhs. If the fees is not exceeding 5 lakhs, that ceiling limit would not be applicable. So it means if you are getting 5 lakh rupees or less relating to any audit client, that ceiling limit will not be applicable. Fine, no problem. But if your fees is for more than 5 lakh rupees, then you have to disclose that though I am taking 5 lakh, though I am taking 8 lakh rupees from you, it constitutes more than 15% of my total receipts, and this is happening from last 2 consecutive years. To whom I should disclose? I should disclose to those charged with governance. Those charged with governance means normally board of directors and above them audit, and the audit committee is there, or the board of director of holding company is there where I have to disclose it. Why to disclose? So that they can take up a decision, audit committee can take up a decision whether we should appoint him as an auditor or not. Now the question is arising in everyone's mind that if such kind of disclosure is being given, what will be the impact? Total audit fees or total fees of the firm? I am talking about total fees of the firm. If you go to your standard, that is independent standard, so they have said fees, and they said fees ka relative size. I am ad verbatim explaining you from there only, though the time with me is restricted to 1.5 hours, but I will do justice with the burning topics rather than other topics. These are the burning topics. We need to have a crystal clarity on these points. So what it says as that requirement which is there is under 410(4), that requirement I'm reading to you, that is very important, where for 2 consecutive years, total gross annual professional fees. This question which you asked me, I'm dealing with this question only, sir. Where for 2 consecutive years, the total gross annual professional fee from the audit client and its related services represent more than 15% of the total fees received by firm expressing the opinion on financial statement of the client. It means what turnover they are talking about. 2 consecutive year, total gross professional fees, that is called total fees, from the audit client and its related entities represents for 15% of total fees received by firm expressing the opinion on financial statement of the client. It means they are talking about total audit fees. So if I have my firm and my total audit fees is 20 lakhs, out of which 4 lakhs is coming from one firm. So if 4 lakhs rupees is coming from one firm and my total audit fees collected during the year is 20 lakh, and 2 consecutive year it happens, I need to communicate to those charged with governance that, sir, we are disclosing you that this is happening, but, and when we have to disclose it? Prior to the audit opinion being issued on third year's financial statement, a professional accountant who is not a member of the firm expressing the opinion on the financial statement perform the engagement quality control review and all. I will come to a EQCR and all that. That is another matter. But first thing which is hitting here is that this disclosure. Now, this is international best practice which is coming to us. There is no harm in that कि हम disclose कर रहे हैं. अरे disclose ही तो कर रहे हैं. What is just a minute, I'm not getting the questions. I'm not getting the questions. Okay. Just a minute. Yeah, now I'm getting the question. Total fees crosses more than 15% of the revenue. Just a minute. I'm getting the question window bigger. Can you just, I will take questions separately because I'm not getting the question exactly over there. So let me clarify you. If it is more than 15%, then what we have to do? Disclose to those charged with governance of audit client what? That 2 consecutive year our total such fees present 15% of the total fees issued by the firm. This ceiling limit will not be applicable if 5 lakh rupees is there, and this is not applicable in case of government companies, public sector, nationalized banks and all. It's okay. Now, what will be the outcome? See, our standard ordering 260 says cast a duty on us that you have to disclose, you have to communicate with those charged with governance. You need to communicate with those charged with governance that though it is more than 15%, but you are complying with ethical requirements, and every member of your firm is complying with the ethical requirements of independence. This is a communication required by the firm. Now, small and medium practicing firms are against this clause. They are saying that if we are showing them that this is 15% of the total audit fees, then they will feel that the firm which is with us is not big, is not competent, its scalability is quite low, and audit committee may decide to replace the auditor. Sir, look, first of all, under Companies Act, it is audit committee's decision looking to the nature and size of the business. They are going to appoint you as an auditor. Looking to size and nature of the business and your size of the firm, they are going to appoint you. It is given under rule number 3 to section 139. Under section 139, rule number 3, they have clearly mentioned that it is audit committee or board of director, and they have to look after the experience and skill of the auditor, and looking to the size and nature of the company, they should select the auditor. So it is always there that the audit committee and auditor will going to have that. And we are not saying in the first year itself you have to disclose that 15%. Second year itself it said no, consecutive 2 years. After 2 years you have to disclose. And if you have disclosed, what will going to happen? हंगामा क्यों बढ़ता, मुझे यही समझ में नहीं आ रहा है. If you have been appointed in a company, you have been appointed for 5 years. In second year, if you say that my 15% more is there, can they remove you? Now my question is, whether board of director or audit committee has a power to remove you? No. Whether shareholders have power to remove you? Yes, but they need to get prior permission from central government that we want to remove. Even in private limited company, they need to get prior approval from central government that we want to remove this auditor. And then they have to write in their application in ADT2 that this auditor we are removing because what reason they will give? Will they give reason that his total fees is representing more than 15%, so his independence is no more, hence we are removing? No, sir. That cannot be a ground to remove an auditor. How one can remove, sir? Tell me. Now the next question comes to me. All over India, I am taking webinar and then I am getting question. The next question comes to me. What about tax audit? What about GST audit? In tax audit, yes, 15% criteria would be applicable to tax audit also. Yes, sir, it applies to tax audit, it applies to GST audit, it applies to company audit. It applies to every audit. So there is no point in that. So would it be a ground for an entity to feel that they have not chosen the right auditor and the auditor's independence is prejudiced because of this 15%, though auditor is declaring that he is independent, but we will not treat him as an independent? No, sir, it is not there. It is not there at all. It is merely a disclosure kind of, nothing else more than disclosure. Please make it sure. So that is disclosure. So when the total fees for 2 consecutive years described in paragraph this significantly exceeds 15%, exceeds 15%, significantly exceeds 15%, the firm shall determine whether the level of threat in such a post-issuance review would not reduce the threat to an acceptable low level if the firm shall have pre-issuance review performed. Sir, there are reviews, there are addressing, there are tools to address such threats. Quality control review is there. We can get quality control review in our firm and provide the review quality control review report that, sir, our firm is maintaining the ethical requirements. So there is no issue in that. So this is the point which is making noise in everyone, every corner of the profession, every nook and corner of the city. There is a noise that why this 15%, why to disclose? Sir, it's an international best practice. Karna hi padega. We have to do. There's no point in that. That disclosure is there. Nothing. कोई audit नहीं छिन रहा किसी से, ना ही उसके पास कोई ground आ रहा है कि वो audit छुड़वा देगा. It's not that also. Now the next point, next burning issue is this nuclear. The persons who are in service, the persons who are in practice, both are requested to go for their respective clauses. Section 260 for members who are in service and section 360 one who are in practice, both need to comply with this requirement of nuclear. What exactly this nuclear is, I'll just request to read this particular point. Just read this particular point. Where is this point is? Just a minute. I'm expanding that so that you can have a better view. Yeah, was my webcam. Oh, it went off. Now, what this nuclear is there? Let's understand. Non-compliance with laws and regulations. It's very, very interesting phenomenon. Responsibility. Just a minute. Responsibility is on the shoulders of auditor and auditee, auditor and auditee both. Auditee means auditee is accountant who is also a chartered accountant. I'm telling that. If there is any act or omission or commission by the client or by the employer, which is contrary to prevailing laws and regulation, it's a headache for chartered accountant. But mind it, again, they are again and again they are saying that why this is there, no non-compliance with laws and regulation. So it's very simple. We have standard on auditing 250. As an auditor, I am talking about. We have standard on auditing 250, which already contains its objective, which I am reading now. SA 250 clearly says that auditor should obtain sufficient and appropriate audit evidence that those laws and regulations which are affecting the figures in financial statement, auditor should have sufficient and appropriate audit evidence that all such laws and regulations have been complied with. Mind it very carefully what I am saying. Auditor should obtain sufficient and appropriate audit evidence that all such laws and regulations have been complied with, which are significantly affecting the determination of figures stated in financial statement. And the second line of SA 250 says that auditor should apply procedures to identify any non-compliance with other laws and regulations. So SA 250 itself gave you an idea that there are two kinds of laws and regulations. One which are directly affecting the figures of the financial statement, and other laws and regulations which are not directly affecting the determination of figures of financial statement, but may affect the entity by having hefty penalties and fines, etc. Now, for example, if I have a client, pharmaceutical company, I have signed the audit report, financial statement giving true and fair view. Financial statements are complying with all laws and regulations and Companies Act and all, everything is giving true and fair view. Next day, Times of India has an highlighted item that company the drugs authority have seized the manufacturing plant and attached the property of your client, who is a pharmaceutical giant, because they do not have license to produce certain Schedule H drugs which are being manufactured by that entity. Hence, drugs authority have attached the property and locked their premises. Now, the going concern itself is in problem for that particular entity, or long litigation and claims will be there with that particular entity. So as an auditor, a finger will be pointed to you that, Mr. You have said that financial statements are giving true and fair view as on 31st March 2020, and on 5th of May 2020, this incident happened, that the property had been attached and all the directors are in jail for violating the Indian Drugs and Cosmetic Act. What you were doing as an auditor? Did you ever notice that whatever they are manufacturing, do they have license to produce that? Sir, I am an auditor. How could I? No, sir, you have to. And not due to this nuclear, due to SA 250, which was already there. Not only due to this nuclear, it was already there. Now it came in the code. And in Indian code, if you are ignoring the nuclear, then you are committing a major offense. Under clause number 7, grossly negligent and due diligent. You were not due diligent and you were found grossly negligent conduct of audit of a pharmaceutical company. How could you ignore that the entity which is manufacturing the drugs in itself doesn't have license to manufacture the drug? That's the point. We read comma, full stop, all inverted commas, and punctuate every punctuation for any circular which is issued for GST, because it is affecting the client. But we never take pains to read a single line without a comma and full stop, without giving a different meaning, which decides our responsibility. That is SA 250. So now, in this lockdown, we should have our renaissance, that whatever practices which are required by SA 250, since 10 years 250 is there in India, SA 250. This nuclear came this time, and this nuclear is nothing different than SA 250. Again SA 250 say, then there is noise, there is a nuisance, there is a chaos, that wow, auditor, how an auditor can determine that whether all the laws and regulations affecting the entities are affected or not. Sir, we are talking of first those laws which are significantly affecting the determination of figures stated in financial statement. So they are laws which are affecting the going concern. So you have to make a list that which are the laws which are affecting the going concern of the entity. You have to have sufficient and appropriate audit evidence that all such laws and regulations have been complied with. Second, income tax provision. Non-compliance of income tax provision will affect the figures determination for provision for tax, deferred tax assets and deferred tax liability. Non-compliance with GST law will going to affect the GST payable and income tax and the input tax rebate and input tax amount. FEMA non-compliance will affect the determination of the figures. So there are many acts which are affecting determination of the figures stated in financial statement. It's very simple. And what about the other laws? So that incident happened in Nestle India. Maggi had been banned. So should I, as an auditor, required to obtain sufficient and appropriate audit evidence whether food and safety standards of India have been complied with or not? No, sir. I am not saying that direct the audit procedure to obtain sufficient and appropriate audit evidence that whether food and safety standards of India have been complied with or not. I'm not saying that. I am saying that, can you please inquire that is there any non-compliance relating to food and safety standards of India? Do they get any show cause notice from that authority? Whether that authority issued any show cause notice or a notice, get a written representation under standards on auditing 580 from management that did they receive any notice from following authorities 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 regarding any non-compliance. Management says no, then no problem. Go to the departmental files, means just ask for the PDF file, ask for the PF file, ask for the ESIC file. You need to check whether any show cause notice or any demand notice relating to PF or ESIC is there. So we need to strengthen our SA 580 evidence, which is known as written representation relating to other laws. But as far as those laws are concerned, which are directly affecting the figures of the financial statement, I must tell you that we need to have what? We need to apply sufficient and we need to apply audit procedures to obtain sufficient and appropriate audit evidence relating to those items. Same NOCLAR is applicable to the members who are in service. It is their responsibility that all the laws and regulations have been complied. Their responsibility is much more wider than as an auditor, because they cannot get written representation from their employer that their employer had been complied with. Their employer will say you are there to get the compliance with. Better you need to ensure that all the laws and regulations have been complied with. Those who are in service should be in continuously touch with the secretarial department. You should be continuously in touch with the legal department, so that you can come to know that whether your employer is non-complying with certain laws and regulations which are out of the ambit of the accounts department. But you need to have an eye on that also. That is called the NOCLAR applicability. It is applicable for practicing for professional accountants in service also, but a silver line is there that it applies to only listed entities, applicable only to audit assignments, and in case of professional accountants in service, applicable to employees of listed entities. But let me clear you, as an auditor, you are not getting rid of SA 250. It was there, it is there, it will be there. You need to check out non-compliance with laws and regulation. You need to check out any instance of that, because non-applicability of ISBA code over listed entity doesn't exempt a chartered accountant of a small company, of one-person company, of dormant company, even of a private company, for non-applying the standards on auditing 250. SA 250 is applicable on everyone. That is very, 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 very important. So that was the second burning issue which I want to make you clear. NOCLAR is there, taken care of. I have explained everything. Now there is one more burning issue, and that is rotation of the auditor. and not only rotation of the auditor, which is defined under section 139(2) of the Companies Act. I am here talking about internal rotation within the firm. This is the third issue which needs to be taken care of. That's the burning issue. Rotation of the internal rotation at the client's entity. Why it is so, let me clarify. There is one threat called familiarity threat. Familiarity threat arises when you have a long association with the client. It happens that sometimes what happens is that I have a client, I am a partnership firm. As I am a partnership firm, I have been appointed as auditor of say X Private Limited or X Limited or a listed company Z Limited. Let's have listed company Z Limited. I am auditor of a listed company Z Limited, and I am an engagement partner for the purpose of audit. 1 year I have conducted audit. For whole term, 5 years I have conducted audit. We are the firm, again reappointed for next 5 years. Again next 5 years, the whole audit in charge. I am the audit in charge itself. I am going on audit. So first, second, third, fourth, fifth year, 5 years, I was engagement partner in the first tenure. Again in the second tenure, again next 5 balance sheets are being signed by me. So the same engagement partner or key audit partner or a person who is reviewing the audit. See, we have 3 persons in SQC. I'm not going into details of SQC, but we have key audit partner, we have engagement partner, and we have EQCR, that is quality control reviewer, engagement quality control reviewer. So one partner is there in our firm who looks after the quality control in the audit. One partner is there who is a key member of the audit team. One partner is there who is known as engagement partner, who is taking whole responsibility of the audit. So we have these partners. Under Companies Act 2013, they came out under section 139 subsection 3 that if shareholder resolves, they can provide for that there must be internal rotation in the firm, that every year a different engagement partner will come, or every 2 years different engagement partner will come, or every 3 years or every 5 years, whatever they want to determine, they can determine. It is their power, it is shareholders power. So we were very safe. शेयर होल्डर कभी समझते नहीं थे, बोर्ड ऑफ डायरेक्टर कभी समझते नहीं थे, इंटरनल रोटेशन का कोई टेंशन नहीं था. 10 साल तक की बैलेंस शीट एक ही पार्टनर साइन कर. And this code of ethics came right now. And it says that, sir, and it says that that revised code of ethics, it says that continuously 7 years, not more than that, a person should be there as an engagement partner or engagement quality control reviewer or key audit partner. And if he is so, engagement partner will have cooling off period of 5 years. And EQCR should have cooling off period of 3 years, and CAP, that is called key audit partner, should have cooling off period of 2 years. They should have a break. Now, is it applicable only for company audit? No, sir. No, sir. It applies to every independent audit. In tax audit also. Sir, if we are partner, what if we are proprietorship firm? No problem there. You yourself should not continue so long in case of tax audits. No, sir. He's not a company. Then I'm signing his balance sheet from last 25 years as a tax audit. Sir, there is a familiarity threat. How you address the threat, it is given in this part 1, that is volume 1. You have to read up. This thorough provision is given. And in this cooling off period, you should not be in any, you should not have any sort of association with the entity. So let me conclude it, what they want to say. It was there, 7 years was there, but the cooling off of 5 year, 3 year and 2 year was not there. And mind it very carefully. Though it was there in 2009 code, but it was not there in our mind. God knows why. Why we have not given emphasis to part A, which was already there in previous. Also this time that this provision got fame because it has been changed. 5 years cooling off to engagement partner. See, if I have signed 7 years, the next 5 year I cannot sign that particular balance sheet as an engagement partner there. So it is given as an engagement partner what we have to do and what not to do. Companies Act, no problems. Companies Act, company will itself decide that what to do. Now the point is, a question comes that if shareholder says, now a very interesting question comes, that if shareholder doesn't pass any resolution for rotation of the partner, whether then also this rotation will be applicable? Yes. Okay. Now important is, in case of companies, I'm talking about some more companies. In case of companies where members of the company prescribes a shorter time period, would that shorter time period shall prevail? Yes. If company resolves that engagement partner should rotate in every 2 years, then we will not wait for 7 years. Mind it very carefully. And if authorities have prescribed certain laws, suppose RBI, NBFC, they have defined certain shorter period of rotation time or whatever time they prefer, they give, you have to comply with those. Though paucity of time is there, I cannot discuss this whole thing in detail by giving examples to you, but my endeavor is here to enlighten you that these are the provisions. Kindly go through the section 540 is there. Download that particular code of ethics part 1 and have a happy reading. I am giving you idea that what important points we have contained in this. And then restriction on cooling off period is also there. You cannot involve in any sort of activities. Then comes the burning issue 4. Very, very important. Management responsibilities. This is another issue which has been there in the new code of ethics. It says that now what happens is, nowadays the digital India is progressing. Client shows, our audit client shows us some of their needs, and they demand that, sir, you should file our returns, you should upload our returns, you should give GST advisory service, you should give income tax advisory services. Now, my friends, I am touching a very, very sensitive topic. First of all, management responsibility, and from there I am moving towards management responsibility. From management responsibility, I am moving towards the tax services. I'm moving there. See, section 607 to 608, and it contains tax consultancy also, which is given in 640. Now, taxation clients. Now, my first thing, I'm addressing two issues simultaneously. Under 600, they have given us a complete guidance relating to what? 640, they have given something which is called taxation services. Now, first of all, let me explain you why we are so worried about these taxation services and why they are having the, just, yeah. See, I have taken so many workshops on code of ethics, and everywhere a question arises, sir, why you are objecting on tax consultancy or tax services or something? See, if you prepare tax return, he is giving you Excel sheet, these are my sales, these are this percent sale, these are this percent sale, and I am filling their form and uploading that form, no problem at all, sir. But he says no, computation of tax, input tax credit, everything should be done by you, and you also do my GSTR 9C audit, GST audit. Now tell me, my dear, you are the maker and you are the checker. How is it possible? The oldest belief in the internal control which is there, that maker and checker should be different. How can we comply with that particular requirement? We are preparing is all GST returns, whether it is monthly, whether it is quarterly, whether it is annually. And then we are certifying that his annual return and his accounts has this reconciliation statement in form of GSTR 9C and signing it. Sir, we preparing and we are signing as if we are testing ourselves and giving marks to ourselves and making a mark sheet and signing in that I am passed. How is it possible? If we have not stopped it, one day will come when courts will say to ICAI that why don't you restrict your member to do these kind of maker and checker both responsibility? Why not stopping them? How a maker can be checker? And if a maker is a checker, how one can find discrepancies in his own creation? It's a basic phenomena worldwide. Why you are not prohibiting your member to do that? That's the biggest question of the hour, sir. Again, he said, sir, you are my income tax consultant. So provision for tax which is coming under the financial statement is computed by me only. Some small firm says, sir, it's better now. We are doing the same and we are taking the same. So it is less risk. Why institute is coming like this? It's better now that we should prepare the tax return and we are signing the audit report. So less audit risk, sir. Please understand, sir. It is less audit risk for you. But what about the user's point of view? He will say, you are the maker, you are the checker. How could I rely on you? Biggest point. Set aside. I'll give you one more instance. Very interesting. Huh? Why Indian courts or Indian appellate tribunal have not raised this point, I don't know. See, one chartered accountant appeared before the appellate tribunal representing his client. Appellate authority is there. They are reviewing the documents. One tribunal member has raised a question. Mr. X, yes. Who are you? Sir, I am representing client Z Limited. Good. What do you want to say on behalf of your client? Sir, this much addition which is there by the assessing officer is not justifiable. I want to defend that, my client. Good. Who is the tax auditor of this entity? Sir, myself. Okay. So you are tax auditor of Z Limited. Yeah. So this balance sheet is signed by you? Yeah. This balance sheet is giving true and correct and true and fair view. You have wrote this? Yes. So now why you came? Sir, I want to represent my client to convince you that, sir, these additions prima facie are not of any base because my tax audit report have considered that these are right and they are the right allowances. And assessing officer is wrong. Why he is adding it? I don't know. In my tax audit report, I gave my point of view. Then that tribunal member will toss a single question to that particular representative of the client that, sir, tell me, you are here to defend your client and you are making a basis an audit report which is signed by you. So whatever done by you is signed by you. Why you came to me to say orally that what is given there is right? Okay, my assessing officer doesn't believe in you. That's why he disallowed all of the things. Send someone else who is independent. Because you are having an advocacy threat. You are advocating yourself. You can't go against your views. Whatever you have done in tax audit, you are going to reproduce it again and again vocally. Why should? Think on that. The world is moving towards a next level independence of the auditor, and doing audit is now somewhat different in this new era, in this new code. I'm just talking about part A. I'm not touching part B. But this part A is really thoughtfully drafted to secure each and every professional from any allegation of self-review threat, self-interest threat, familiarity threat, advocacy threat, and intimidation threat. All these 5 threats have been very finely knitted in every clause of this code of ethics under part 1. And that's why I want to explain. Now, what basis I have given you, now you can answer all the questions. Can I calculate tax for my client? Sir, if you calculate tax for your client and it is of a significant amount and that amount is appearing in the balance sheet and the balance sheet you are signing, there will be a self-review threat. Better not to do that. Sir, I'm planning tax, I'm giving advisory services. Sir, it will again create a self-review threat and advocacy threat. Why you want to do that? Don't do that. Let the others do that, you do audit. Sir, better है मैं audit छोड़ देता हूँ. Yeah, that's far better. Do everything except audit. I'm not kidding. I'm really very serious about that. Don't do audit. Do everything else. And if you are doing audit, stop doing everything else. Because these provisions are not going to let you do anything apart from audit. Now, the whole practice is going to be divided into two areas: taxing, audit, and non-audit. In our big firms, in our medium-sized firms, in our small firms, there'll be two different teams who are taking care of tax advisory services, audit services. No member of the team are common. Hi, this can be done, I'm saying, but when you don't have two different teams, when you are a proprietorship concern, and you are saying I have the division and I have that division, sir, you are a proprietor, you are signing that if a different partner is doing some different work and different, so whatever allowed by law, you can do it, but one has to take care about the threats, and those threats need to be addressed everywhere. My dear friends, topic is so thorough, so deep, that a single section needs 2 hours to explain. And within 1.5 hours, which is given to me, and it is almost now over, I will request any queries. If you want to raise to me, you can raise queries to me on whatever I have discussed. Now I will take certain queries which are there, I think, questions. Entire audience have been shifted to queries on WhatsApp. Can I take WhatsApp of yours? What will make the difference? Just so there are the queries. Let me check. I will take queries differently and will mail it to organizers. I'm really very thankful to my dear Vijesh, Vijendra, who is after me since long, to have this seminar with you all. I'm thankful to other Vijesh and my partner, my colleague, who have invited me on to have a great talking to you. It's almost more than 150 members to whom I am virtually joined. So please take care in this very difficult times. We need to stay at home, so have a great learning with these kind of webinars. So thank you very much, Vijayan Bhai and his team members, to have me on this particular seminar. Thank you very much. Now I should take your leave because the other speaker is going to join all of us now. So thank you very much. Thanks a lot.
Sir, thank you so much, sir. On behalf of our team member Virag, Abhishek, and myself, we again thank you. 200 participants are there, sir. but at the
Okay.
time उनका जो topic था, सुनते सुनते जो काम की चीज थी आपको सुन के, the request for the notes, kindly share the soft copy with us. So we will share
Yeah.
with the members who are the attendees, and we're receiving a lot of good feedback from you. And you are the icon of the audit, as we know, all over India basis. And looking forward to hear you face to face also in the Mumbai after the lockdown, because code of
Yeah.
ethics is a very important subject. So, sir, thank you once again. Thank you, members. Thank you, viewers. Stay safe at home and take care. Stay healthy.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you from our side also, sir, once again. And thank you all participants
Yeah.
also for taking part in a large number. We have around 200 plus audience today, sir.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Asim sir. Thank you, Abhishek Shah. Thank you, Virag Shah, for organizing a wonderful seminar on everyday basis during the lockdown. Once again, thank you. Stay safe at home. Stay healthy. Thank you. Bye.
All are requested to have a vote in quick poll. It's already going on. Just have a vote, please.
So
Sir,
poll
we
is
got a
going on.
wonderful feedback over poll also from the participants. Around 90% participant given a extremely satisfied and moderately satisfied of feedback. So all credit goes to you, sir. Thank you for a wonderful session, much needed at this time of about ethics,
Okay.
where our profession is very much in need of requirement of this type of practices. So we
Thank
are
you.
ending webinar right away here. Thank you all. Thank you so much, Vijendra ji, for all the entire coordination activities.
Thank you.
Pleasure, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Pleasure. Thank
Thank
you,
you,
Asim sir.
Vijendra bhai.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. Keep shining like us, sir, Asim sir. Thank you.
Thank you.